Hi and welcome to my review of Jordan Peele's latest film, Nope. So this is now the third film that he's released. His first movie, Get Out, I absolutely love. I went to see that in the cinema knowing absolutely nothing about it when it came out. I hadn't seen a trailer for it, I hadn't read the plot. I knew it had some good critical response and that was it. So one night on my own I went out to see it and was absolutely blown away by that film. And it's easily become one of my favourite horror films of the last 10 years. I think because he'd set the bar so high with that first movie, going into his second film, Us, I couldn't help but feel a little bit disappointed coming out of that movie. You know, it's still a good film, but that third act just really goes off the rails for me. I think perhaps he was maybe a little bit overly ambitious with some of the metaphors and some of the social commentary he was trying to get across. It just got lost a little bit in all the chaos of that third act of the film, and overall just felt like nowhere near as tight of a movie as Get Out did. So I was still really excited to go and see Nope. The trailer looked amazing. I love UFO, monster, alien type movies as well anyway. So knowing that Jordan Peele was directing a film like that, I was still definitely going to be there to see it on the big screen. But having now seen it, I think it's still a good film. There's a lot to recommend here, but like with Us, it is a little bit disappointing, I think. There's a lot of good things in this film, but I feel like there's just a few too many things, again, it was let down by. There were a few flaws that I couldn't overlook in the movie. But still a lot of good things about this movie, so let's get into that. You know, like with Jordan Peele's first two films, it's expertly directed. I think he has a real knack for building up an atmosphere for a horror movie. You know, he has one or two little things he'll do at the start of his films to kind of set you on edge or throw you off. And then you have that feeling of discomfort in the air where you know something bad and something crazy is coming, but you just don't know what yet. And in this film, he sets up the first act of this film perfectly. There's a big sequence in the middle of the film surrounding the house. So much insane imagery on screen. It was a really, really intense sequence. And at this point, I was absolutely captured by the film and was really interested to see what this was going to build to and what was going to happen next. It's a great cast here again for one of Jordan Peele's films. He's brought back Daniel Kaluuya, who plays the lead role. And he hasn't got much dialogue in this film. He's a very reserved kind of character, but he just has a really nice presence about him. He's one of those kind of very likeable guys that when you're following him on screen, you just want to experience this with him. You like going along for his journey and seeing the movie from his point of view. So Keke Palmer, she plays his sister, and she's like a great opposite to him, where she's just a bundle of energy, and she brings a lot of the humour to the film as well. You know, the opening scene with her when they're in the studio, and she's just got this, this insanely fast dialogue, and she's very, very entertaining to watch and a very likeable character. So I think the kind of opposites of those two together worked really nicely for the film. I thought the film was paced really nicely as well. You know, even that opening act where it's a little bit slower and you're introducing us to these characters. You know, all the dialogue between them is always very entertaining and interesting. And the shots are amazing, the big wide shots of the ranch they're living on, and then those nighttime scenes with Daniel Kaluuya first seeing these UFOs. It's a really great opener to the film, so it never feels like anything is in there that shouldn't be there. It all works really nicely and built up nicely, and even though I have problems with the final act of this film, I was still definitely entertained throughout the whole running time of the film. Now, one of the scenes I'm mixed on this film is there's a scene involving a commercial that the film opens with and it kind of jumps to throughout the movie. So I won't go into too much detail so I don't spoil it for anybody who hasn't gone and seen the film yet. But it was a really, really effective scene, a very creepy scene, and was a great opener for the film. But at the end of the film, I didn't feel like it had tied well enough into the main plot of the story. It wasn't even until I'd left the cinema and my friends and I were discussing it, and I only suddenly then realised whilst talking about it what the relevance of that whole segment was even about. And I feel like it should have been clearer from watching it in the movie exactly what he was trying to say with those scenes. So whilst I think they were good, I just don't know if he connected them well enough to the main plot of the story. Another artistic decision he made for this film as well was adding chapters into it. So every few segments of the film he adds a new chapter, and they're named after various horses that he keeps on the ranch there. But I didn't feel like it really added anything to the film. You know, like if you think of a director like Quentin Tarantino, who often uses chapters in his movies, they're often to signify a complete change of scenery, a completely different character. It felt like a different segment of the film, which later on down the road will tie them all in together. Whereas I think in this film, the way Jordan Peele has done the chapters, it didn't really separate the scenes enough to warrant them being there. So it was kind of like a scene would end, it would say new chapter, and then it would just carry on from where the film left off. So it's not a bad thing. I just don't think it actually really added anything of quality to the film, in my opinion. As this film goes into the final act, there's definitely a tonal shift between the first half of the movie. You know, when this movie starts out, it definitely feels like a horror film. It feels like you're watching a full horror movie experience, and because that's what I was expecting going into that third act, when it kind of has this weird shift and loses a lot of the dark tone, it kind of lost me a little bit. And it almost feels like an action movie in some ways in the final act of this film. So whilst I still think it did work for what they were trying to do with the movie, I don't dislike it. But I was just invested in this as a horror movie. So when it made that change going into the final part of the film, it didn't entirely work for me. I found the last act of this movie a little bit of a mess as well, because there's so much going on, there's so much chaos, characters doing things that didn't really make a lot of sense to me in the moment when they were doing them. I didn't fully understand the plan of what they were trying to do. So as it's all unfolding, it's crazy and it's quite fun to watch, but I ended up finding it quite hard to keep up with every little thing in the movie that was going on. So it ended up losing it a little bit for me. And again, no spoilers here, but the final design of what this UFO ends up being and the explanation behind it just wasn't at all satisfying for me. When this film is building up and you're wondering what this thing is, I had so many ideas in my head of what it could be and how they were going to try and explain it and showing us exactly what it was and what it was doing. And the final conclusion of what it is, it didn't really work for me, to be honest. I'm sure this will be down to subjective opinion. I'm sure a lot of people will like it, but I just found it mostly strange, to be honest. I didn't think it was that scary. It just didn't have the right effect for me for what I was looking for it to turn out to be. So overall, yeah, it's a good film, but it is a little bit disappointing considering how good Get Out was. And I've wanted to at least be near to that quality. But I just don't think it's reached it, unfortunately. You know, as I said, the first half of that film is really perfectly done. So if it had really kept at that level all the way through the final act, I probably would have given this a 4.5 star. But with some of the problems it has and the final act not really working for me, my final rating for it would be a 3.5 star. So please let me know in the comments what you thought of Nope and how it would compare to you to Jordan Peele's first two films. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.